Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you a book review from the 6 R.L. Stine novellas originally released in the year 2000. And the book for this video is going to be The Adventures of Shrinkman. For those of you that don't know, this book, according to R.L. Stine, he has confirmed this in recent history, is the long-lost Series 2000, book number 26, The Incredible Shrinking Fifth Grader. And if you guys have seen the original cover art done by Tim Jacobus that's on the Goosebumps Wiki, you would know that the original cover for the Series 2000 book that never came out had a white rodent fighting a shrunken kid with a big pencil. And that scene's displayed in this story. So I'm 100% positive that this book, without a shred of a doubt, is the Long Lost Series 2000 book, just told in novella form. Ironically, it doesn't feel like a completed book. I mean, it needs about like 15 to 20 more pages, given the original size. I think the reprint size, the ones that look like these, are slightly smaller in page count. I think it needs a lot more added to it. But nonetheless, yeah, I'm pretty positive that this would have been a full-length story and intended to be a full-length story. So when I get to the rating on this book near the end, I will rate it like a normal book. So let's get into the plot overview without giving too much away. So the story starts off with this kid named Danny. He's the main protagonist in this story. And Danny is a die-hard fan of his favorite comic book superhero, Shrinkman. And he's kind of more than a fan. He's like a passionate lover of comic books just in themselves. He is in love with comic book art, and he wants to perfect his art so he can one day take over the drawing duties of the Shrinkman comics when he gets older. And that's his main dream in life. Not to mention, I think R.L. Stine predicts today's superhero movie relevance pretty well in this book. You know, over 20 years ago, Shrinkman has a movie franchise that's very successful in the movies, and Danny goes and sees every single movie at least multiple times while they're in the theaters. He loves going to the movie theaters and watching Shrinkman movies. Unfortunately, his best friend Megan is not the biggest fan of Shrinkman and likes to pick on Danny a lot. And the first tumultuous moment in the story is Danny and Megan are in their science class trying to discuss about their science fair projects that are coming to be, and they need to work on their science projects, and Megan really wants to get an A on her science fair project. And while she's scolding Danny for being too obsessed with his comics to care about his school grades or something like that, Danny almost chokes, and Megan gives him a glass of water and like saves his life from choking. And Danny musters up the courage to ask Megan to go see the Shrinkman movie and just try it out, see if she likes it. And Megan says, okay, I'll go see the movie with you. Danny, he's I don't know if he's like a poor kid, but his dad works at the movie theater as a projectionist, as it's revealed in the story. And I think his mom, might have worked or stays at home. I don't really think it ever touches on what the mom does. But the dad is a projectionist at the movie theater, and unfortunately he can't get free movie tickets or anything like that with his dad's discount or anything. They have to pay for tickets. So knowing that he has to pay for the tickets, he's not going to have enough money for like snacks and drinks and whatnot. So when they get to the theater, they get their movie tickets and they go inside, and Megan gets this gigantic, tub of popcorn, gets a big, huge drink, and Danny can't afford anything, and he feels bad, and he walks off. And he notices a soda machine where, cans of soda are, cheaper than, your fountain drink, so he was like, I'll just buy me a can of soda. And he sees a product called Shrinkman Cola. And he's such a big fan of Shrinkman, he's going to buy anything that Shrinkman has its name on. He buys a can of cola, he meets up with Megan, he opens up the can, he drinks some of it, and it's the worst tasting soda he's ever drank in his life. It makes him feel nauseous, makes him lose his appetite, kind of thing. And then he goes into the theater where he expects that his dad is going to be working projection and should be working projection, and they sit down in their seats, and he keeps looking up in the projection window to see where his dad was, and his dad hasn't moved or anything, hasn't seen any sign of people up there, so he's starting to wonder if maybe something's wrong with his dad. And he goes up to the projection room, and lo and behold, his dad is in there. He's just asking why Danny is in there. And during this interaction, Danny gets shined on by a projection light, and it jumps a little ahead. This is where the story starts to feel like the middle pieces weren't quite fit in quite yet. But then it jumps to Danny practicing basketball, and as it's revealed that Danny plays basketball. He's like a really good basketball player, and that's also another thing he likes to do. And he starts to not feel good. Now, what starts to happen is he notices that his clothes are starting to fall off of him, and he doesn't know what's wrong. He tries to tough it out. He goes to his class, and his clothes are still falling off of him. He goes to his nurse. They don't know what's wrong with him. His parents get involved, and sooner or later, after visiting with a doctor, after he keeps, decreasing in size, it's basically confirmed that he's just shrinking. And there's like no known cure for it. And this is like the realistic fear that comes out in this story, is that it's kind of like a terminal illness almost, that Danny's gonna fade into nothing. And that I really enjoyed about this story, is that the shrinking mechanism is treated like a terminal illness. Like his shrinking has no definite end to it. And his parents are devastated. Danny's devastated. He has to stay at home. He can't play basketball. He can't see his friends. And he starts to go home, and eventually he shrinks down to the size of a baby. And he falls asleep, and when he wakes up, he is about the size of, I think it said like less than an inch tall. And he has to catch a ride to go to his doctor, because if he doesn't go see his doctor, they can't figure out how to treat him. So he goes through an ordeal where his parents find him, and they put him in a cage, but then he accidentally falls out of the cage, and he has to basically go on this journey through his neighborhood and hitch a ride on a big bus to catch a ride to the doctor's office and somehow get inside. And throughout that story, there's a lot of close calls and some pretty terrifying scenes dealing with like gigantic, monsters, especially here, like with the giant grasshopper. I think there's a couple birds that get involved as well. Pretty scary stuff. It's basically like Night of the Giant Everything. And shout outs to Steven Chavez and Spongy444 again for telling me about this book. But anyways, he finds his way into the doctor's office. He manages to catch the attention of the receptionist after going through all of this stuff. They get his parents to come find him. He's been missing for a while. They thought he might have died or something. They get him back into possession. And then Danny realizes that he has to try to reverse the methods to give him back to normal size. But before that happens, his best friend Megan and him have this interaction, and there's a big revelation that happens about how Danny ended up the way he is. And they realize that they have to do this certain thing to get him back to normal size. So they try one thing, they realize that they need to do another thing on top of it, and then they realize that they need to do another thing on top of that. And lo and behold, the situation presumably gets resolved until the very end, where the resolution to how to fix the problem actually creates another problem. And that's basically where the ending leaves off. And it leaves off on a borderline comedic note too. So all in all, pretty fun read. So let's get into the positives about this without, simping on it too hard. But I really enjoyed the shrinking mechanism in this story. I like that it was treated like a terminal illness. I think that's a really good concept, and it's a very fresh take on a shrinking story. With that being said, there are predictable tropes of a shrinking story in here that you will see in like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, or maybe even a similar R.L. Stine story, Night of the Giant Everything. Some similarities in there. But nonetheless, the shrinking idea of being a terminal illness really added to that fear factor. Danny, I really identified with Danny because I'm a big comic book fan myself. I like his hobby. I like his passion for what he does. He's a big basketball fan, a big comic book fan. I'm fans of those. Megan, however, she's a very despicable character. I don't think that she bogged the story down with her nonsensical actions and stuff like borderline bullying Danny throughout the book. But I don't think that she is a good person. And that made me dislike her, but I don't dislike her in the fact that she was written badly. I just don't like her as a character. But with the negatives, I will say is that this book is pretty predictable. And I'm not saying that it's a complete negative, but it kind of hinders on the uninspired route. And it's kind of a shame because the premise of the shrinking being a terminal illness is such a cool, unique, standout point in this story. But the rest of the tropes were basically cookie cutter, typical shrink story stuff. And that was, you know, it basically was a negative for me. Just felt a little uninspired, but it had its good moments. And the ending, and I guess the way Danny had to get out of his situation, I don't think it's the best, per se, and I think it's borderline ludicrous. But, you know, I really enjoyed this. So let's get into the rating. I think I'm going to give this an above average rating. I think this was a pretty solid entry. Where I wanted to put it, between a 4.5 and a 5, though, however, given those negatives I had with it feeling uninspired, obvious parts of the book where there needed to be some filler stuff to, you know, add more to the story, because there needed to be more at some points, you know, and basically, yeah, I mean, those are the really big ones I have. I'm going to give it a 4.5 out of 5. Pretty deserving for this, and I'm rating this on a normal book basis, too. Even though this is a novella length, I think a 4.5 is a pretty deserved rating for this. This is pretty solid. And I'm kind of disappointed it was not released in Series 2000, but it is what it is. So yeah, that's my thought on The Adventures of Shrinkman. I really enjoyed this story. If you guys have read this book in the comment section, please leave a comment and tell me, did you love it or did you hate it? I'm dying to know, and I'll see you next time.